I want to show you some very in-depth data comparing the performance of actively managed funds like unit trusts or mutual funds in Malaysia and overseas with the corresponding exchange-traded funds or ETFs, which are passively managed. Now in Malaysia, if you look at over 100 equity unit trusts versus the ETFs that track the Kuala Lumpur Composite Index, FBM KLCI, you will see a big difference. I picked 3 funds to actually illustrate my point. So over the past 10 years, the best actively managed fund delivered an average of 9% annually, while the ETF tracking the KLCI had a negative return of minus 1.41. Now another actively managed fund delivered 3.67 on average every year, which is still outperforming the ETF. However, there are of course unit trusts or actively managed funds that underperform, like the one that I'm showing you had a minus 5.74% return over the past decade. Now, if you visualize this using a chart, a price chart, the top performer is highlighted in blue, and the second is the outperformer or above average performer shown in red, which beats the benchmark, which is the green line representing the FBM KLCI. So when people say, yeah, ETFs are always the best choice because, with low fees, that is not necessarily true in Malaysia when it comes to, their returns net of fees. Even though ETFs are low cost, they might not deliver into the returns that you desire. Now, it's not just about cost, it's about the returns after fees. Sometimes even with higher fees, actively managed funds can outperform ETFs or the index or the benchmark. Now, let's compare some actively managed funds or unit trust focused on US equities versus the S&P 500 benchmark. Now, S&P 500 deliver about 14% annually for the past 10 years, while the best performing fund in this comparison delivers slightly less than 13%, 12.8. However, the actual return from investing directly into an ETF tracking S&P also depends on the timing of the investment, especially for Malaysian investor converting ringgit to US dollar. And for Malaysian investor, converting ringgit, to US dollar, of course, can affect your returns positively and negatively. Also, as a Malaysian investor, you have to consider the 30% dividend withholding tax, which could reduce the average total returns over the years, which really is not represented by the annualized returns of the S&P 500 shown. Now, apart from that, when people are talking about whether unit trust delivers better net returns or ETF delivers better net returns, you have to know the timeline that is being referred to, because different timeline gives you different answers. Like the yellow line in this chart representing the S&P 500, which most ETFs tracks the US market. You can conclude that for the past 1 year, there are initial months for the past 12 months when the red color unit trust actually outperformed the ETF, and then in later months it outperformed, but in the early months it underperformed, whereas the blue color unit trust actually underperformed most of the months. And then when you stretch it out to say for the past 2 years, you get a different perspective on the periods where both the red and the blue unit trust outperform or underperform at different periods, right? So the question to ask is, end of the day, is there a small or huge performance gap? If you look at this, obviously not much. So like when even you look at even top badminton players in the world, there are periods when you are considered like below your usual form, and there are times also you are in your best form, and that's just the normal part of life. Because end of the day, a lot of people like Lee Chong-wei or Li Zhijia, they are still in the top 5 or top 10 world ranking, right? So why does it matter so much when the more important thing is how much you are earning, how much you are saving, how much you are actually investing? Are you investing enough money or not, saving enough money or not in the first place? Remember earlier I talked about unit trust versus ETF in Malaysia. A long enough data show us that it will be absolutely foolish to actually invest in KLCI ETF because the performance gap is just too huge. Of course, you don't want to invest into the underperforming yellow line unit trust as well, because that is even worse. What you need to know from all these videos that you see on social media or from influencers, these are mostly made by media companies, and they are being branded or brand themselves as financial educator, influencer. But end of the day, they're actually, most of them are getting sponsored by financial companies to promote the sponsors, of course. And of course, when you are working, say, within certain platform, let's say platform 1, where all you have is all unit trust. Someone working within that ecosystem, we say that unit trust is better, and vice versa for someone or any entities offerings or working within platform number 2, which is only consisting of ETFs. Because if you put me into platform 1 or platform 2 as the promoter, I will say the same thing accordingly, right? It's just how the world works, right? So in other words, platform 1, most of the time, probably they do not have, an ETF solutions. That's why they say what they say. Whereas platform 2 does not have any unit trust solutions or even the outperforming unit trust. That is why they say what they say. But when clients come to me, I always use data to back up my advice, regardless of any platform, whether, it's a unit trust platform, whether it's platform 1 or 2, whether unit trust or ETF, but always go for the one that is in your best interest. Ideally, using a platform where you can compare and access both at the same time, at the same place. Up until now, you see that what I've shown you is a glimpse of what I do for clients as a consultant or advisor. So you see when people DM us over social media and say, people like, what do you actually do? What do you have to offer? What are your services? Then I can tell them that our clients come to us at the juncture of their life when, money is important, they seek second opinion before making that important life or financial decision. In short, I educate, I advise, I coach my clients to plan for their money, wealth, and investment better by doing the thinking for them, and if needed, execute the plan. At the same time, solving the problems, giving them perspective that they have never thought of or even overlooked. This is one of the many types of wealth management advisory where we help our clients make better, informed money decisions to reduce financial leakages, make their money work harder and more efficiently. Of course, there's a link above or below this video or link in bio where you can check out our clients' stories and a scope of advice or services that we provide, and you may want to follow for more past and future videos like this on your feed.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. So generally, how do you feel, after the first time, until now we talk?
So I would say, firstly, I I'm an ex-consultant, so I did a lot of research to pick the right financial advisor, which is you. And based on all the testimonials that you have on your website, nobody else has those kind of testimonials. Secondly, what I really like about you is that you're not tied to or you're not fixated on any particular fund house. You are independent, so your opinion will be independent, unbiased opinion. You're very direct in your opinion. You will not try and tell me like sugar-coated stuff, right? Which is what is needed, right? If you, like a doctor, you will tell me what the disease is. You will not try to beat around the bush, which is very important. Thirdly, I feel that you're very good at catching the pulse of the client. Like, for example, for me and my wife, you were able to understand our background, where we are coming from, what reservations or concerns we have. Based on that, you gave us the right advice. So we were more focused on mitigating risk than increasing return. So you gave us advice which was spot on for that. And and like you have, and the fourth thing is I would say you have never been pushy with anything, right? You said, no, I don't like, it's okay, Raman. Even if you invest 10,000 ringgits or you invest 100,000 or 1 million, it's all the same to me. It doesn't matter, right? You have never asked me to put more money through iFast. Never ever, right? Which is, nobody does that. Everybody will say, hey, Raman, can you put more money next month? So if you combine all of these things, that is why we are like, if I have any doubt and I want very honest and independent opinion, I will just go to Liu. And even if Liu doesn't like what I'm doing, he will still tell it on my face.
Hopefully, not too harsh,
No,
hopefully in a very diplomatic way,
Yeah, very diplomatic, but that is what we want, right? Like, yeah, like a doctor. You're like a doctor for finances, right? Like in very simple terms.
Let's continue the conversation, right? When you go to like country like India, I can tell you I have Indian expatriate clients working in Malaysia who either they send money back to India to invest, or they are actually investing back into their home country, India, via funds, which is available in Malaysia. The Indian stock market, if you look at Mumbai Sensex, it has a benchmark, 10 years annualized return of about 9.3, while one of the best performing funds gets about, 9% annually. Again, I want to emphasize that it's important to look at funds with long performance history to see if they consistently outperform or underperform the index. Now, in a country like Japan, you can invest into an ETFs tracking the Nikkei 225, one actively managed fund or unit trust at a 9.5% annual return for the past 10 years compared to Nikkei 7.5%. However, from 2015 to 2023, actively managed fund actually underperformed the index, but in the past 2 years, it has matched, the index performance. So when people say like ETFs always outperform due to low fees or unit trusts are expensive, it depends on the country and the funds that are being compared. Some platforms only offer passively managed funds or ETFs. Hence, this is what what you see online in some influencer, they are recommending that. As advisors, we are actually neutral on this. We base our advice on data and numbers. If passively managed funds or unit unit trust or ETFs or whatever in a certain sector or country, if that unit trust significantly outperform ETF, you go for the ETFs. If a passively managed funds in a sector or a country, which is what we call as exchange traded funds or ETFs, then if it outperforms the actively managed fund, then of course we'll direct you to that as well. We'll recommend them. Now let's look at China. Now in China, actively managed funds outperform the China Air Shanghai and the Hang Seng Index by about 6% annually. If you look at data, while the ETFs tracking the Chinese stock market indices deliver a return of less than 1% or even a negative return over the past 10 years. So the key point is that the choice between an actively managed fund or unit trust or mutual fund, or between a passively managed funds or ETFs, should be based on data and numbers, not just a general blanket statement. If the data shows that a passively managed fund significantly outperform actively managed funds in a specific country, region or sector, then the recommendation will be to go for this passively managed fund. Now, however, there's something about China is that post-COVID, no funds has made decent price recovery in China, indicated by the past 3 years of price movement trend from 2022 to 2024. This is to show that when you're invested in China unit trust, it's not a unit trust problem, but there is a trend specific to the China stock market. Doesn't matter if you invest in China unit trust or China ETFs, you would likely still have paper loss since 3 years ago, or if you have invested before 3 years ago, then probably it has yet to recover. So it's important, of course, to really consider the net return after expenses. A passively managed fund with lower yearly expenses may seem like the better choice because that is what ETF's advantages are. But the net return actually is what matters. If, say, you have your fund A1, an actively managed fund, has higher expenses but better net returns than fund B, which is a passively managed fund, then it's obvious which one is the better choice. And when people complain that the unit trust of the fund is not making money, may have invested without proper knowledge or advice. So it's really not about the unit trust structure itself, but it's about choosing a fund that underperforms the index or the country's stock market as a whole. And the high upfront charges that you hear people talking about on social media, I think you would agree it's a red flag. It's actually an everyday Tom, Dick, Harry and Sally problem. When they are investing like 1,000, 5,000 or even 10,000, when you are a high net worth investor with at least like 6 figures of investable assets that qualifies you for private banking, most of these are the type of clients that I normally work with. What I can tell you is that they are not paying like 3%, 4%, 5% or 6% upfront charges. They are paying way lower than that. So isn't that twisted? The richer pays lower, the not so rich actually pays higher. It isn't fair, yes, I agree, but that's how the brutal world of investing in these kind of funds, how the world works, right? But do you know what is even bigger red flags? When banks and Thai financial agents, they recommend investment-linked policy to you when your intention is just to save and invest. This usually also known as saving plan or endowment plan, and it's perfectly legit financial solutions that's available in a lot of legitimate channels, but it actually comes with an even higher sales charge just because there is an additional, but I think it's unnecessary insurance wrapper on top of it. If you think about 5% unit trust upfront charges is expensive, wait until you discover that in this kind of arrangement, a package within an insurance policy, you could be on the first year, you're being charged 24% upfront for your investment, which is usually in the fine print that you never bother to read when you sign on. And these insurance savings plans actually also, end of the day, they still invest into unit trust of whatever we have done for the analysis in this video. It's the same thing. But I would say that investing directly without the insurance wrapper is far more cost efficient for you, just to invest into the funds directly, whether it's actively managed or passively managed.